Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, great to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at what the Bible can teach us about being proactive
Okay.
versus being reactive, and we'll be looking at two really interesting figures.
Okay.
We're going to be going all the way back to the Old Testament to look at Joseph,
Right.
and then we're also going to be looking at the story of Adam and Eve
All right.
and just seeing, kind of what we can glean from these stories.
Yeah,
Because it's really amazing how these ancient stories can still offer valuable lessons to
absolutely.
us even today.
Yeah. And, it's fascinating how they offer kind of a glimpse into human nature.
Right.
And especially, when it comes to dealing with temptation
Exactly.
and making choices that have consequences that can last a really long time.
Yeah. So let's start with Joseph.
Okay.
And we're going to start in ancient Egypt.
Right.
And, he's sold into slavery by his brothers
Right.
and
Right.
ends up in Potiphar's house. And is, facing some pretty intense temptation
He is.
from Potiphar's wife.
Yes, and that's where it gets really interesting, right?
Exactly.
Because here you have Joseph, he's stripped of his freedom, he's in a very vulnerable position,
Mhm.
and yet when he's faced with this temptation, he makes a really proactive decision.
Yeah.
He chooses to honor his values. And we have to remember, this could cost him everything.
It could cost him his life. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think that, one of the things that's so interesting is that,
yeah.
he was in a position where it would have been very, very easy
Right.
to rationalize giving in,
Oh, yeah.
and even maybe convince himself that it was the only way to survive.
Sure.
But he chooses a different path.
He did.
And it makes you wonder, what must have been going through his mind in these moments?
It speaks volumes about his character. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about avoiding a physical act, right?
Right.
It was a conscious decision to stay true to his principles, even when he was under immense pressure.
Yes.
And I think, this concept of delayed gratification that we see here, which is, making a tough choice in the present
Right.
for something greater in the future.
Yeah.
I think it's something we can all relate to,
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
one degree or another.
And let's not forget, his proactive choice landed him in prison.
Yes, it did.
Talk about taking the high road and ending up in a tough spot.
Yeah, but then things take a really dramatic turn, don't they?
They do. Yeah.
I mean, his imprisonment, which seems like a setback at first,
Right.
becomes like this catalyst
Yeah.
for his rise to power.
Exactly.
I mean, think about it. He could have just wallowed in self-pity
Oh, yeah.
or resentment,
Absolutely.
but instead he chooses to make the best of it.
Yeah, he uses his time wisely. He showcases his, his wisdom and his talents, and it ends up catching the attention of the Pharaoh.
That's right.
It almost feels
It does.
like a reward, for staying true to himself
Yeah.
during those times.
I think it reinforces this idea
Yeah.
that, doing what's right doesn't always lead to immediate gratification.
Right.
But it does often set the stage for greater things down the line.
Yeah.
And that's where his story, I think, becomes truly inspiring.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, he goes from prisoner to, interpreting dreams, predicting this famine,
Yeah.
and then ultimately saving countless lives.
Right.
It's a really powerful example of how, seemingly bad situations
Yeah.
can become these stepping stones
Absolutely.
to something much greater.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is this all solely based on his faith,
That's a great question.
or did other factors play a role?
Yeah. I mean, while faith undoubtedly played a major role, I think
Yeah.
it's worth considering his upbringing,
Sure.
his personality, even the possibility that he saw, a bigger picture at play here.
Right.
Perhaps he recognized the potential consequences of giving in,
Yeah.
not just for himself, but for others,
Yeah.
his future and the lives of others.
Right.
And I think that adds another layer of complexity to his decision-making.
Yeah, so it wasn't just blind faith.
Right.
It was a calculated risk, a conscious choice
Yeah.
to endure hardship in the present
Mm-hmm.
for a potentially brighter future.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It really challenges us to think about the long game, doesn't it?
It does.
How sometimes, those tough choices
Right.
can lead to unexpected rewards down the line.
Right.
But let's shift gears now
Okay.
and journey back to the Garden of Eden.
All right.
Adam and Eve's encounter with temptation
Yeah.
paints a very very different picture.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Because while Joseph chose a proactive approach,
Right.
carefully weighing the consequences of his actions,
Right.
Adam and Eve's response is much more impulsive.
Yeah, it's like they're caught off guard,
Yeah.
reacting purely on instinct.
Yeah, and then instead of taking responsibility,
They start shifting the blame.
yeah, Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent.
Right, the classic blame game.
Yeah.
We still see that playing out today.
All the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that blame shifting
Right.
is a hallmark of reactive behavior.
Yeah.
It's about avoiding accountability,
Right.
failing to acknowledge the power of our own choices.
Right.
But, I think this story is not just about a piece of fruit.
Right.
It really delves into this nature of human fallibility.
Okay.
And, the concept of original sin.
Yeah, it's interesting how, their decision leads to this profound separation from God and this introduction of pain and suffering into the world.
Right.
How do we interpret that in a modern context?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Is it about literal sin?
Right.
Or more about, understanding the human tendency to make mistakes and then try to avoid the consequences?
Or what, exactly.
That's a question that's been debated for centuries.
Of course, yeah. Some people interpret it as a literal fall from grace.
Right.
Like a defining moment.
Yeah.
That altered humanity's relationship with the divine forever.
Wow.
But others see it as a symbolic representation of, the human struggle with temptation, our inherent vulnerability to making choices that we later regret.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what if Adam and Eve had paused?
Right.
Like Joseph did?
Yeah.
What if they had taken a moment to reflect?
Right.
To consider the potential consequences of their actions?
Could they have avoided this fall?
Yeah. Could they have avoided it?
It's a thought-provoking question.
It is.
Maybe that moment of pause could have changed the course of history.
Wow.
But maybe it's less about avoiding mistakes altogether.
Okay.
And more about how we respond to them.
Right.
Because we all face temptation, right?
We do.
Maybe we all make choices that we wish we could take back.
Yeah, so it's not about striving for perfection.
Right.
But rather about cultivating this ability to own our mistakes.
Yeah.
Learn from them and make better choices moving forward.
Precisely. And that's where I think these stories, despite their ancient origins, become incredibly relevant to our lives today.
Yeah.
They offer a framework for understanding our own tendencies toward proactivity and reactivity.
And we can see ourselves in both.
Absolutely.
Joseph and Adam and Eve.
We've all experienced those moments of clarity and resilience.
Right.
And we've all fallen prey to impulsiveness and blame shifting.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's a reminder that we're all works in progress.
Yeah.
The key is to become more aware of these patterns in our own lives so we can make more intentional choices.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly navigating this tension.
We are.
Between our better angels.
Right.
And, our more impulsive selves.
Right.
But how do we actually shift from that reactive state to a more proactive approach?
That's the question.
Because it's easy to talk about, in theory.
It is.
But putting it into practice can feel daunting.
You're absolutely right. It's a journey.
Right.
It's not a quick fix.
Right.
But there are practical steps we can take.
Okay.
And I think Joseph's story offers us a powerful clue.
Okay.
Remember that moment of pause?
Yeah.
Before he makes his decision.
Yeah.
That's where it all begins.
So it's like hitting the brakes.
It is.
On autopilot.
Yeah.
Giving ourselves a chance to breathe.
Yeah, to think.
To choose a response.
Yeah.
Instead of just reacting.
To choose rather than to react.
Exactly. It's about creating space for intentionality.
Okay.
And, that pause can be filled with different things.
Sure.
Some people might find solace in prayer.
Right.
Others might find clarity through journaling or meditation.
Right.
The key is to find what helps you connect with your values.
Yeah.
And access that inner wisdom. So it's about tapping into that part of ourselves.
It is.
That can see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The long-term consequences.
Right.
Instead of getting swept away by the immediate emotions of a situation.
And this leads us to another crucial step.
Okay.
Taking responsibility.
Okay.
Just like Joseph owned his choices, even when they landed him in prison.
Right.
We too need to acknowledge the power of our decisions.
Yeah, we can't always control what happens to us.
You can't.
But we can control how we respond.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing that blame shifting.
Yes.
Like we saw with Adam and Eve, ultimately keeps us stuck.
It does.
It prevents us from learning and growing.
Absolutely.
And evolving.
So instead of looking for someone or something to blame, we can ask ourselves, what role did I play in this? What can I learn from this experience? How can I make a different choice next time?
It's about shifting from a victim mentality.
It is.
To one of empowerment.
Yes.
We become active participants in shaping our lives.
Yeah.
Rather than passive recipients of circumstance.
And finally, we need to consider the long-term implications of our actions.
Okay.
Just as Joseph's proactive choices ultimately led to his freedom and the salvation of countless lives.
Wow.
Our decisions today have the power to shape our future.
Yeah.
And the world around us.
It's about asking ourselves, what kind of legacy do I want to leave?
That's right.
What impact do I want to have on the world?
And sometimes those choices might require sacrifice, discomfort, or even temporary setbacks.
Right.
But as Joseph's story shows, those challenges can often pave the way to something far greater.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
yes,
I think the message is clear.
It is.
We have a choice.
We do.
We can react impulsively, letting our emotions dictate our actions.
Right.
Or we can choose to pause, reflect, and make decisions that align with our values.
And our aspirations.
And it's not about achieving some unattainable ideal of perfect proactivity.
It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
Exactly.
It's about striving to make more conscious, intentional choices each day, even if it's just one small step at a time.
This has been such an insightful exploration.
It has.
Of proactive versus reactive living.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
On this deep dive, we hope it sparked some new ideas and inspired you to approach your own decisions with a little more intentionality.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep choosing the path that leads you towards your best self.
Your best self.